The knight is not Rudy! While I could sort of see what Rudy-Nighters were getting at before Chapter 5, I always thought the evidence didn't exactly add up, and the biggest hints at him being the knight were in the form of admittedly suspicious dialogue during his interactions. But you could also make the claim that Rudy is aware of the knight's existence through his wife's motives and not have to stretch it and say that Rudy's illness doesn't impair him in the dark world. I genuinely don't understand why so many people believe this theory to be correct, especially after Chapter 5, because every time I look at the evidence Rudy-Nighters and Asriel-Nighters by extension bring up, it really just seems like they're just trying to be original simply because Carol is set up as a red herring and because Death Knight is a bandwagon. But at this point, Death Knight is objectively the most likely theory, and I'll be explaining why that's the case as well. Just note, I'm not trying to actively insult anyone who does think that Rudy is the knight, but I will be heavily insulting their arguments and claims. Hopefully this video will put it into perspective for all of you that your theory genuinely sucks and does not make much sense at all. In fact, it somehow makes even less sense after release of Chapter 5. Let's see how fast I can disprove Rudy Knight theory. Noel gets a phone call during the beach scene where her mom tells her that Rudy fell down at the festival, and I genuinely think that people aren't giving nearly enough credit to this wording as they should. Fallen down is a term used at Undertale to refer to many different things similar to determination. Fallen down is obviously the fourth track in the game used to refer to the fallen humans. More importantly, it also was used in the True Lab to refer to monsters who fell down into a comatose state shortly before their bodies turned into dust. Monsters still turn to dust in Deltarune despite having the ability to bleed, unlike monsters from the Undertale universe. Rudy is obviously a very sick man, and claiming he isn't would be brainless and preposterous at best. The general comeback Rudy-Nighters have here is, "Oh, but he was on a ladder, and he fell off the ladder, so now he's hurt." Well, if Rudy just fell off the ladder or tripped on a rock and fell over and was most likely okay, Carol would have absolutely no reason to call Noel. Rudy is a mentally tough guy. He puts himself through a lot of taxing physical work that he doesn't have to due to his illness, but his hard-headed personality doesn't let anything get in his way, not even the possibility of death. This means that even if Rudy really did just fall off a ladder, Carol would only call Noel if Rudy was seriously hurt and in terrible condition to do anything, putting him back in the hospital. They don't just let people out of the hospital who are seriously hurt like this. Rudy wasn't even supposed to get out of bed in the first place, and after hurting himself, they sure as hell wouldn't let him out now. So even though the night took forever to reach the dark world, Rudy would not be ready to do more night shenanigans in simply a number of hours, given his ever-declining physical health. And the fact that you would even have to make up an excuse for the buzz term fallen down, as Rudy having fallen off a ladder instead of having entered a comatose state, objectively makes the theory more dubious. If it was obvious that he fell off a ladder and fallen down wasn't a term associated with monsters entering a comatose state for death in Undertale, we wouldn't be having this ridiculous discussion in the first place. But I guarantee that Rudy-Nighters will act like pigeons playing a game of chess and just knock over my entire argument because I don't get it, and they'll call me dumb in a negative comment leading the video. So if that wasn't enough to persuade you to go against this theory, let's take a look at Noel's reaction to the call. She asked her mom, "Are you sure?" as saying that Rudy falling down was something terrible she dreaded to hear. If fallen down wasn't a term used for monsters becoming comatose in the Deltarune universe, then wouldn't Noel be asking her mom, "Is he okay?" That's certainly the reaction I would have if my mom called me about my dad falling down. I wouldn't question the validity of her statement because falling down for humans is a pretty minor injury, all things considered. This is like my mom calling me to tell me that my dad kicked the bucket. Why would she call me about my dad kicking a literal bucket? It would obviously be used as a metaphorical term for passing away. It does hurt your body to fall down more with age, sure, but the way Noel responds to this narration seems to be conveying a sense of denial that a terrible tragedy has occurred for her father, rather than him just falling off a ladder and breaking his back, which he could recover from in weeks' time. But even if he really did fall off a ladder, which is a dumb argument in the first place, he would be in no condition whatsoever to go to the Dark World and fight Flowery, even though being in the Dark World would reasonably give him much more power than before. "Oh, but he looks hurt in the Dark World when he hits the wall." Yeah, I would be hurt if I slammed my butt into a wall too. Who the hell wouldn't? This is genuinely such a dumb theory at this point, and I'm really done talking about it. Just because Rudy has funny dialogue in chapters 2 and 4 that suggests him having knowledge about the Night Conspiracy, that does not make him the Knight by any means. In fact, Asgore, who has done copious amounts of research about the Dark World and is in cahoots with Carol, believes that the Knight is responsible for making the fountain that made Death disappear, essentially ruining his life in the process. Rudy and Carol will not do this to their own daughter, let alone blame Asgore and take away his job because of it, if they didn't think he was responsible. I mean, I guess Carol might be someone to do that since she's seemingly a morally great person, but Rudy definitely would not do something like that to his best friend in college, and he would do anything to get his own daughter back. so him causing her to disappear in the first place would be incredibly stupid. Now, obviously, Rudy Niders will come back to this argument by saying that Asgore doesn't know what he's talking about and that the knight did not open the first fountain, still clinging to the idea that the knight's motivation isn't actually to cause the roaring, but is to find his daughter. This argument only still makes sense if you believe that Asgore is completely mistaken about who made the fountain that caused Des to go missing, which is a bad argument considering he was literally there at the time that it happened and was the one to pick up the black shard that was left behind. He probably knows the event better than anyone else at this point, given how much research he has done afterward and how it has consumed him. If Asgore knew that Des caused her own disappearance by making the fountain, or if Chris caused her to disappear, he definitely would not want to bring them to justice by ending their life. And Carol definitely would not want that either for Chris, but especially not for her own daughter. She would have to know about Asgore's plan to bring the knight to justice whatsoever to support Asgore's efforts to learn more about the Dark World, which is essentially just being her like, sure, go ahead, do whatever you want, I don't care to see what it's about or what your possibly nefarious and obsessive goals are. Which is stupid considering how the first thing Asgore wants to do when he returns to the Light World is to go to Carol and explain everything. Why wouldn't he regularly update Carol on his findings and plans, etc., etc.? Any theory claiming that the knight isn't Des only gets worse and worse with time, I swear. Des causing her own disappearance either accidentally or on purpose would make much more sense in context of her reckless and adventurous character. And Chris making the fountain to cause her disappearance to feel guilty for it later would be thematically cohesive and in line with either of these characters, and it wouldn't make much sense with anyone else. In other words, Des causing her own disappearance only to become the knight would be frankly extremely cool. Even Azrael Knight, as unlikely as I already found it, actually surprisingly would work more in this context than both Carol and Rudy Knight. Him accidentally causing the disappearance of his own girlfriend, leading him to stray away from this nature as a sweet and popular teenager and become a more snarky, sarcastic version of himself as time went on, would honestly be sick if he actually was the knight. And Azrael's never-fading obsession with his girlfriend and desire to bring her back would certainly rub off on Chris's negative perception of themselves and reality as well, leading to their morally gray nature as well as their desire to join the conspiracy and aid their brother in bringing back Des, even if it meant causing the roaring. But you could apply the same logic here that I did with both Carol and Rudy, and the knight barely resembles Azrael physically and symbolically like it does for Des and her parents, so the theory loses steam in both of these ways. Azrael is now the second most likely knight candidate behind Des, but it's only like a 6 out of 10 theory at best, and I don't want to talk about it anymore. I find it cooler and a little more likely than either of Noel's parents being the knight at this point, but it's still not very likely at all. As for Chriselle Knight, it makes even less sense than Rudy Knight, which I didn't think was possible, but I honestly kind of like the concept. I think you could make a pretty good AU/fanfic about this, but it's not actually happening in any universe. And Papyrus Knight still sucks and has always sucked, so I'm not giving it any more thought. Anyways, Des Knight is still the best knight theory. Sorry if this video offended you. I'm clearly annoyed with knight theories at this point, as you can see, but I don't think anyone is dumb for having different ideas. I just think these ideas in particular suck.